Hello, everyone. Welcome to the deep end of the story jungle. I'm Nikki. Step inside, but leave the light at the door. You know, some stories are found in the headlines, but the real ones, the ones that actually matter, those are whispered in the corners of dark bars where the air is thick and nobody wants to be seen. Here at Story Jungle, we're going to dig into those shadows. We're going to talk about the grit, the cold-blooded greed, and the secrets that men died to keep. If you've ever wondered what really happens when the city goes to sleep, you're in the right place. Today, we're opening the vault on a legend, the Lufthansa Heist. A story of millions, a mountain of betrayal, and a trail of ghosts that still haunts the streets of New York. So, breathe in that cold, heavy air, and let's get into the story. Picture New York City in the late 1970s. It wasn't the city of bright lights you see today. Back then, it was a giant, breathing beast, hidden in the fog and carved up by the five families. It was a place where the law didn't reach past the street lamps, and the real power was held by men who lived in the darkness. You couldn't even buy a drink without a made man taking his cut. In the middle of this concrete jungle, there was a man named Jimmy Burke. They called him the Gent. On the surface, he was all charm, expensive suits, a winning smile, and a $100 bill for every waiter. But if you looked too closely at his eyes, you'd see the predator. Jimmy was an Irishman in an Italian world, a man who could never be liftingly part of the family, but he was so ruthless, so efficient, that they kept him closer than blood. He was a man who would buy you a steak 1 minute and wrap a piano wire around your neck the next, without ever losing that calm, steady look in his eyes. One night in 1978, in a dimly lit corner of a Queen's tavern, a place where the jukebox was always too low and the shadows were always too long, a man named Louis Werner approached Jimmy. Werner was a loser, a gambler drowning in debts he could never pay. But he had one thing, a secret. He worked at the Lufthansa cargo terminal at JFK Airport, and he knew about a vault. A high-security room that, on certain nights, was stuffed to the ceiling with millions in untraceable cash, diamonds, and gold, just sitting there, waiting in the dark. For Jimmy, this wasn't just a heist. It was the Holy Grail. He spent weeks in the shadows, staring at floor plans, memorizing the heartbeat of the airport, calculating the exact seconds between life and life imprisonment. But Jimmy knew he couldn't walk into the lion's den alone. He needed a pack of wolves, men who were comfortable in the dark. And more importantly, he needed the blessing of the King of Canarsie, a man who ruled from a grease-stained trailer and didn't forgive mistakes. In this jungle, you're either the hunter or the prey. If you win, you're a legend. If you lose, you're just another body under the concrete. Jimmy knew that for a job this big, he couldn't just hire muscle from a street corner. He needed men who lived in the cracks of the world, men who had no reflections in the mirror. First on his list was a young man named Tommy DeSimone. Now, I want you to picture Tommy. He was only 28, with a handsome face that could melt into a terrifying mask in a split second. Tommy wasn't just a gangster. He was a human hand grenade with the pin already pulled, just waiting for a reason to explode. He carried a .38 caliber revolver like it was a part of his own hand. There's a story that he once killed a man just to see if his gun worked. Jimmy loved him like a son. but it was the kind of dark, twisted love that usually ends with a shovel and a shallow grave. Then there was Henry Hill. If Tommy was the fire, Henry was the ice. He was the glue that held Jimmy's chaotic world together. Henry was the smooth talker, the guy who knew which airport guards had gambling debts and which doors could be left accidentally unlocked. He didn't have Tommy's thirst for blood, but he had something much more lethal. He knew how to navigate the system. Together, they were the core of the operation, a trio of men standing on the edge of a mountain of gold or a deep, dark hole in the ground. They spent nights in the back of the Roberts Lounge, Jimmy's own bar, huddle over maps, planning every turn, every guard's movement, and every possible betrayal. But even with his wolves ready, Jimmy couldn't move a single inch without the ultimate blessing. In the New York underworld, the city isn't yours. It's rented from the gods of the 5 families. Jimmy was Irish, an outsider, and he knew he had to pay his taxes to the Italians if he wanted to keep his head on his shoulders. In the 1970s, the 5 families weren't just criminals, they were a shadow government. The Gambinos, the Lucchese's, they had eyes in every alleyway and ears in every courthouse. If you stole $1 in New York without their cut, you weren't just a thief, you were a dead man walking. People didn't just disappear in this world, they were erased. No body, no funeral, just a quiet, empty seat at the dinner table. Jimmy knew that the mafia's power didn't come from guns, but from the terrifying certainty that they could touch anyone, anywhere, at any time. To them, a man like Jimmy was just a tool, useful until he became a liability. The fear wasn't about being arrested. It was about the kiss of death. It was about the silent realization that you had offended the gods of the underworld. So, when Jimmy drove to Canarsie, he wasn't going to a business meeting. He was walking into a lion's den, hoping the lion wasn't hungry that day. He arrived at a place that didn't look like a throne room at all. It was a grease-stained, beat-up trailer parked in the mud, a pathetic-looking tin box. But the moment Jimmy's hand touched the cold metal door handle, that pathetic trailer transformed into the most dangerous place on Earth. Because inside, the laws of the United States didn't exist. There was only the law of Paul Vario. As he stepped inside, the immense, terrifying weight of the 5 families seemed to collapse into that tiny, cramped space. The air inside that trailer was different. It was heavy, stagnant, smelling of stale espresso, cheap cigars, and secrets that had been buried for decades. Paulie Vario was a man of few words. He didn't need to shout to be feared. He sat there in the shadows, his heavy eyes watching Jimmy as he laid out the plan for the JFK vault. $6 million. It was a number that could buy a lot of power, but in Vario's world, it could also buy a lot of unwanted attention. Vario gave a slow, deliberate nod. The green light was on, but that light came with a shadow that stretched across the entire room. Vario's only rule was cold and simple. Don't make a mess, Jimmy. Don't bring the feds to my door, because if you do, I won't be the one going to prison. The deal was sealed in the dark. The crew was armed with untraceable shotguns. The black ski masks were bought. The getaway van was prepped. But as they walked out of that trailer into the Brooklyn night, the air felt colder than usual. Because in this jungle, once the hunt begins, there is no turning back. There are no apologies. You either come home with the prize, or you become part of the scenery. It's 3 a.m., December 11th. New York is freezing. Inside a black Ford van, 6 men are sitting in silence. They aren't talking like you see in the movies. They're tense, breathing through black ski masks, waiting for the signal. Among them is Tommy DeSimone, probably the most dangerous man in the room, holding a shotgun and waiting to lead the charge. They aren't just here for the money. They're here because Jimmy Burke told them to be. At 3:12 a.m., the move begins. They bypass the perimeter and head straight for the Lufthansa cargo terminal. This wasn't a shootout. It was a cold, calculated home invasion on a massive scale. They burst into the lunchroom and the offices, grabbing the employees one by one. The first guard, Kerry Whalen, gets pistol whipped across the face before he can even reach for a radio. The message was clear. Don't be a hero, and you might see your family tomorrow. They knew exactly who to look for. Using inside information from Werner, they found the senior agent on duty. They forced him at gunpoint to the high-security vault. You have to imagine the scene. The fluorescent lights flickering, the sound of heavy boots on the concrete, and the pure, uncut fear in that room. When the vault finally opened, it wasn't just a few bags of cash. It was stacks and stacks of American hundreds and foreign currency, nearly $6 million. They spent the next hour throwing those bags into the back of the van like they were bags of trash. Their muscles were burning, and every sound from outside, the roar of a jet engine or a distant siren, made their blood run cold. They weren't legends yet. They were just men trying to get out of there before the law arrived. By 4:16 a.m., they peeled away, the van sitting low on its suspension from the weight of the loot. As they disappeared into the Queen's fog, they thought they'd won. They thought they were untouchable. But as the sun started to rise, a single stupid mistake was already waiting to destroy them. A mistake that would turn their victory into a death sentence. Next time, the celebration ends, the good fellas start to vanish, and the blood starts to spill. I'm Nikki, and the jungle is about to get very, very dark. See you in the next one.